Imagine standing alone on a vast plain of possibility, the horizon stretching infinitely in every direction, but with nothing in front of you but a silent void. This is the existential foundation on which Jean-Paul Sartre builds his philosophy of radical freedom. According to Sartre, human existence is defined not by any predetermined essence or purpose, but by the act of choice itself. From the moment we enter consciousness, we are confronted with a void, nothingness, into which we must make our decisions. Every choice, no matter how trivial, reverberates through the tapestry of our lives, creating threads of meaning where none existed before. Choosing nothingness does not mean embracing despair or nihilism. Rather, it means recognizing that there is no predetermined plan for our lives. We are not born with an inner nature that dictates our path. Instead, we continually reinvent ourselves through the decisions we make. Imagine a statue being sculpted out of thin air. Every gesture, every breath shapes and determines the final form. For Sartre, consciousness is like this empty space. It is defined by its capacity to negate, to say this is not, and by that negation to project a future self. When I say, I am not angry, I also implies the possibility of anger, a self that may or may not come. This is nothing short of a defect. It is our greatest strength. It allows us to rise above the brute facts of our situation. You are born into a certain family in a certain country within a certain era, but you are not doomed to these circumstances. Through your choices, you can redefine your beliefs, your values, even your deepest desires. To live authentically for Sartre is to embrace, yet this freedom has a crushing weight. Sartre is famous. Consider the student, this existential angst, the trepidation. There is nothing to choose in matters of love, and when we build our careers, friendships, or creative projects, we often do so with the secret hope that they will tie us down, provide permanence. But permanence is an illusion. Everything changes. By choosing nothingness, we embrace impermanence and become participants in the continuous act of creation. Our lives become fluid works of art, constantly evolving, constantly unfinished. This perspective changes the way we view failure. If our identity is not a static entity but the sum of our actions, then mistakes are not indictments of our worth. They are brushstrokes on the canvas of self. Each failure offers a new opportunity, a fresh moment to redefine direction. Nothing gives us the grace to begin anew without the burden of a predetermined self. It takes courage to walk this existential path. It means waking up every morning and asking, what will I choose today? What version of myself will I bring to life? Am I willing to take responsibility for these choices? The philosopher Simone de Beauvoir, Sartre's lifelong companion, described this as the challenge of becoming the authors of our own lives. We hold the pen, but the ink is our freedom, the paper, the void. In choosing nothingness, we accept that life has no final chapter until we write it. Our freedom is our most precious attribute, and with it we shape our destiny. This philosophy offers no consolation, it offers power. The power to free ourselves from social scripts, to invent values that resonate with our deepest convictions, to shape a life that is uniquely ours. When you contemplate your own choices, consider this. Every moment of decision is an opportunity to embrace nothingness, to move beyond the limitations of the past, and to fashion your future. The void is not a void at all, but a playground for the soul. Choose nothingness, and in doing so, choose yourself. In the realm of political engagement, Sartre's insistence on choosing nothingness acquires particularly urgent resonance. When citizens vote, protest, or organize, they are not merely executing preordained civic duties, they are actively asserting their freedom and inviting others to do the same. A vote cast in apathy or ritual is little more than an act of bad faith, an abdication of the very power that makes democratic institutions possible. Conversely, when we vote with full awareness of our responsibility, when we see our ballot as a blank page upon which we inscribe our vision for society, we enact Sartre's project of radical creation. In doing so, we transcend the roles of, yet even movements themselves must guard against degenerating into static in cultural production. At a more intimate level, Sartre's concept of nothingness invites us to, practically speaking, cultivating. An ongoing awareness of nothingness requires exercises in mindfulness of choice. Begin by observing a routine action: pouring coffee, tying shoelaces, sending an email. Instead of acting automatically, pause to recognize that each gesture is not mandated by destiny but by past habit and self-imposed necessity. Ask yourself, what other possibilities exist? Could I pour the coffee? Another exercise involves reframing external constraints as invitations to creativity. When facing a deadline rather than lamenting its tyranny, one can treat it as the negative space space that defines the contours of one's creative process. Just as a sculptor uses empty space to shape a form, so too can the time limit compel us to make decisive, authentic choices, rejecting extraneous options and focusing on what truly matters. By choosing to see constraints not as shackles but as defining frames, we reclaim our agency and honor the void that makes definition possible. Sartre also challenges us to interrogate our language. Speech is the medium through which nothingness finds voice. Every utterance carries within it the power both to assert and to negate. Yet language can also become a fossilized code, cliches, buzzwords, ideological slogans that mask our freedom by presenting certain meanings as self-evident truths. To speak authentically, we must first experience the silence of nothingness, a refusal to fill every gap with stock phrases, an embrace of pausing, of thinking before speaking, of letting words arise from the void rather than from habit. In literature, this impulse generates new metaphors. In conversation, it fosters genuine dialogue rather than monologue. Importantly, Sartre's nothingness is not a private realm of solipsistic freedom. It is inherently relational. When I choose nothingness in relation to you, when I see you not as an object to satisfy my desires, but as a free subject like myself, we open the possibility of authentic encounter. Friendship, collaboration, love all gain depth when both parties acknowledge their mutual freedom and co-create a shared project. This dynamic undercuts hierarchical or transactional relationships. A boss who treats employees as mere cogs in a machine denies their nothingness. A manager who recognizes the creative potential in each subordinate fosters an environment of co-authorship and innovation. Perhaps one of the most challenging aspects of Sartre's thought is that it denies us the comfort of moral absolutes. There is no repository of universal values outside our shared projects. Ethics arises existentially through our collective negotiations. When communities confront issues of justice, they do not discover pre-existing moral laws. They must deliberate, choose, and thereby instantiate values. The risk of bad faith looms large here, as ideological dogmas can masquerade as transcendent truths. Yet the alternative, ethical pluralism grounded in ongoing freedom, requires courage, openness, and continual reaffirmation of our intersubjective responsibility. In practical terms, this amounts to creating spaces, town halls, digital forums, art collectives, where individuals can engage in structured but open-ended dialogue about the values they wish to live by. These spaces must be experientially democratic, allowing for provisional agreements that can be revised as participants gain new insights. By treating every ethical consensus as a temporary project rather than a final verdict, we honor Sartre's commitment to nothingness. We acknowledge that our values, like our identities, are always works in progress. Finally, embracing nothingness transforms our relationship with mortality. When we see ourselves as nothing fixed, death loses its sting as the erasure of an immutable essence. Instead, death becomes the closing chapter of a self-authored narrative, one that we have written, however imperfectly, through our choices. Recognizing this can inspire urgency in our projects. The finitude of life becomes a clarion call to live authentically, to choose boldly, to craft a legacy not bound by static definitions, but alive in the freedom of those we touch. In conclusion, Jean-Paul Sartre's invitation to choose nothingness is nothing less than a call to reclaim our birthright of freedom and responsibility. It demands that we reject every temptation to hide behind roles, institutions, or ideologies that would fix us into inanimate objects. It compels us to recognize the void at the heart of consciousness as the wellspring of creativity, ethics, and love. Each moment presents a fresh horizon of possibility, an empty canvas awaiting our brush. To live fully is to embrace the void, to own our agency, and to sculpt ourselves, our relationships, and our societies from the nothingness that underlies all being. As we delve further into the practical implications of choosing nothingness, we come to see how this stance permeates every sphere of human activity, from personal growth to global politics. At its core, Sartre's conception of nothingness demands that we treat our lives as ongoing projects, dynamic, imperfect, and perpetually open to revision. When we accept that our identities and values are not handed down as immutable truths, we liberate ourselves from the tyranny of what has always been and embrace the exhilarating uncertainty of what might be. Consider the realm of education. Traditional schooling often treats knowledge as a fixed commodity. Students are vessels into which facts must be poured, and success is measured by how closely their answers match those in the teacher's guide. From a Sartrean perspective, this model encourages inauthenticity, training young minds to see learning as passive absorption. In contrast, an education grounded in nothingness would view the classroom as a laboratory of freedom, where both teacher and student co-create curricula, question foundational assumptions, and treat every lesson as provisional. In such an environment, mistakes are not failures to be penalized, but opportunities to explore new vectors of inquiry. The result is not only deeper understanding, but the cultivation of autonomous individuals who see themselves as authors of knowledge rather than its consumers. Turning to the workplace, we notice similar patterns. Corporate cultures frequently valorize efficiency, standardization, and strict role delineations. Employees are encouraged, if not forced, to conform to predefined job descriptions, performance metrics, and career ladders. While such structures may yield short-term gains in predictability and output, they risk stifling creativity and fostering bad faith. Workers learn to identify not as free agents, but as interchangeable cogs. To counteract this, organizations can adopt a Sartrean ethos by inviting employees to question the purposes behind their tasks, to propose alternative methods, and to see every project as a site of open-ended experimentation. By intentionally leaving certain aspects of projects undefined, embracing planned indeterminacy, companies can tap into the latent freedom within their teams, spurring innovation that rigid hierarchies often suppress. In the sphere of interpersonal relationships, choosing nothingness transforms how we engage with family, friends, and lovers. We tend to think of relationships as pre-built categories. You are a sister, a best friend, a spouse, and these roles come with ready-made scripts. But if we approach each connection as an evolving project, then even long-standing bonds become renewed through ongoing negotiation. Siblings renegotiate power dynamics, friends reinvent shared rituals, partners rewrite the unspoken vows that govern their intimacy. This constant dialogue prevents ossification. It ensures that relationships remain vibrant and responsive to each person's evolving freedom. Rather than clinging to the comfort of predictability, we lean into the creative tension of co-authoring our bonds, celebrating the fact that no 2 days of any relationship need ever be identical. Environmental ethics, too, gain depth under the light of nothingness. Standard approaches to conservation often rely on appeals to natural order or inherited moral duties. To protect Mother Earth because it's our duty, or because nature has intrinsic value. While such motivations can be powerful, they risk receding into empty slogans when not continually re-examined. A Sartrean environmentalism would begin from the void, asking, what values do we choose today to guide our stewardship? It recognizes that the concept of nature is itself a human construction, laden with cultural assumptions. By making our environmental commitments explicit projects, subject to revision as we learn more, we avoid the complacency of ritualistic activism and foster an adaptive ethic that responds creatively to ecological crises. Let us now turn to technology and the digital age. Social media platforms, algorithmic recommendation engines, and data-driven feedback loops often shape our behaviors in subtle, deterministic ways. We click, like, share, and scroll, encountering the illusion of choice even as our preferences are being nudged by unseen forces. Sartre's philosophy insists that genuine freedom cannot be outsourced to code. To choose nothingness in the digital realm means cultivating critical awareness of the architectures that mediate our experiences. It means interrogating why we follow certain influencers, why we engage with specific content, and whether we truly consent to the patterns these platforms impose. Digital detox retreats, open-source alternatives, and community-driven platforms are all attempts to reclaim the void, to reinsert human choice into systems that aim to predefine our behaviors. On the level of global politics, Sartre's nothingness underscores the contingency of nation-states, borders, and collective identities. While people often inherit citizenship, culture, and language as given, these constructs emerge from historical contingencies and political decisions. To choose nothingness is to recognize that a border is not an eternal fact of nature, but a human-made line that we can redraw, reinterpret, or even dismantle. Movements for transnational solidarity, climate coalitions, diaspora networks, human rights alliances embody this spirit by refusing to let inherited divisions dictate the scope of our moral concern. They treat humanity itself as a project, a collective work in progress that demands continuous re-evaluation of who counts as us and them. Finally, let us examine the role of art and imagination in this existential framework. Art, in Sartre's eyes, is the quintessential expression of nothingness. A painter stands before a blank canvas, a sculptor before a lump of clay. Neither substrate dictates the outcome. It is the artist's freedom that transforms emptiness into form. But importantly, the viewer's engagement is equally creative. When I gaze at a painting, I do not simply absorb a fixed meaning. I project my own associations, experiences, and questions into the work. The artwork, like my consciousness, is an open field of possibility. This reciprocity, the interplay between artist and audience, between creation and interpretation, reveals the social dimension of nothingness. We co-author meaning. In sum, embracing Sartre's nothingness is not an abstract philosophical posture reserved for ivory tower debates. It is a lived practice with tangible effects on how we learn, work, love, govern, and create. By treating ourselves, our relationships, and our institutions as open projects rather than sealed systems, we honor the radical freedom at the heart of human existence. We accept that every moment offers a blank page, and we take up the pen without fear of making permanent mistakes, because in a world of nothingness, there are no final drafts, only ongoing compositions. This journey into nothingness demands courage, honesty, and perseverance. It asks us to face the vertigo of boundless freedom and to transform that dizziness into the momentum of creative action. When you choose nothingness, you embrace both your deepest vulnerabilities and your most profound potentials. You step into the void not to lose yourself, but to discover the limitless terrain of who you might become. And in that discovery, you not only craft your own life, you illuminate the path for others to do the same.